Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session. You're here to learn about our access categories. Our presenter for today is going to be Crystal Fosdick. Crystal, take it away.
All right, thank you, Lucy. Our agenda for today, we have quite a few items we're going through. We're going to go through what is the access category. We're going to look into getting permissions into the access category, and then how to use the page menu and the page access page, and then managing permissions to groups and to schedule and time off templates, how to manage the dashboard setup for each of your access groups, managing that mobile permissions, and then utilizing the advanced page. So what is the access category? The access category is where you give permissions to all of the different pages, categories, tabs, options within the system. There are 3 different types. There's going to be not allowed. So that means that access category that you're working with does not even see the option in the system. The read only will give that access group options to view the information, but they won't be able to make any adjustments to the data. If it's something like the accrual history page, they'll still be able to update any of the date ranges that they want to review, but they can't make any adjustments to that. And then lastly is full access. So that's going to most likely give that access group permissions to touch anything on that page, pending any other kind of access configuration. For example, I may have full access to the timesheet, but if you restrict my access to the holiday pay code, I can't touch any records or add holiday to the timesheet. But I still technically would have full access to it. Now, if you don't have permission to use the access category, you'll want to do one of 2 things. First, if you're a supervisor or maybe not the NovaTime administrator for your organization, you'll want to reach out to that person first and ask them for permission. If you are the NovaTime administrator or the time administrator and you still don't have access to this category, you'll want to reach out to our support team to have them enable that for you. And that's going to be at support@ascentus.com. So the page menu page is where you actually get to activate the different categories and pages each access group will be able to see and use. So you'll notice off to the left-hand side of my page, I do have the categories listed. So that's like the attendance category, the scheduler, the employees. And then once you activate one of those categories, you'll be able to go to the main part of the page and activate or deactivate the different page options. In our example here, I actually have all of the pages activated that are possible, except for the request controls in the scheduler. I can't touch that page. I can't see that page if I'm assigned to this access group. A lot of the pages in Access actually auto-save. So this page, especially if you're coming in here and activating a category, you'll want to wait for the page to refresh. If you're deselecting different pages in that category, you'll want to make a change and then wait for the page to refresh. All right, so let's actually just pop into the system here and use this live. So Access category is in your menu, Access, and then I'm going to start on the, well, let's go back to the list page because that isn't even part of the PowerPoint there. The list page is where you actually create the overall group. So you'll see I have different administrator access groups. I have a couple of different employee access groups, and I probably have a couple of different supervisors as well. The naming of the access group is just for your information so that when you're assigning employees or users to those individual access groups, you have a little bit better understanding of what permissions that person might be getting. And then I'll start with the administrator since that's going to give us more of our options. So here we are in the page menu. In the top left-hand corner of my screen here, you're going to see that we're in the access category on the page menu page. And again, just like from that slide I just showed, this is going to show you all of the different categories that are enabled and then all of the different pages. So let's say this administrator access, I don't want them to be able to see the overview for the attendance category. I'm just going to uncheck the page and let it refresh. Same thing with the overview for the scheduler category and the overview for the employees. So again, this is just the on-off switch for the different categories and pages. To dive a little bit deeper into this and actually give them full access or read only to some of these items, that's when we're going to jump to the page access page. Okay, so at the top of my page, click on that option, and then you'll notice all of the categories that were enabled from our page menu are now listed at the top of this page, so we can click into them. And then all of the additional options for the different pages in that category are going to be listed here. So you'll see something like this, the employee personal profile. It's grayed out completely over here off to the right because it's not selected from the page menu page. The same thing from that overview that I just turned off. So I can't even make a decision if it's not allowed read-only or full access because we've already decided that from our previous check mark. But then I can come in here and say, I would like this administrator access group to be able to see unclaimed punches, but not do anything with them. So that's where I could come in here and change the unclaimed page to just read only. Okay. And again, this page auto refreshes. So it blinked for us here. And that means the next time anyone assigned to this access group logs in, the unclaimed page is now going to be read only. A lot of the changes as you're activating and deactivating or changing the permissions from read-only to full access, it does require the users to log out of the system and log back in before you see that change. So if somebody is already logged in as the administrator access group, they may still have full access to the unclaimed page until they log out and log back in. Now, as you can see here in the titles here off to the left-hand side, this is telling us this is the attendance category in the summary page, and that's it. So this is controlling read-only, full access to the entire summary page. Now, if I jump further down, you're going to see some other items. Okay. So here we can see we are in the attendance categories, and this is specifically for the hours entry timesheet, or the attendance category on the timesheet page, specifically looking at the copy function. So once you get through the actual, full access read-only decision, when you go down further on the page, if any of those other pages have additional options that you can make those decisions on, they'll be listed down below. So it'll always tell you what the category is, what the page is that it's located on, and then what the option is. So currently, Administrator Access has the option for full access to the multi-add button on that timesheet page. If I didn't want them to see the multi-add option at all, I could just do the not allowed. As the page refreshes, it'll save that. And then anyone who logs in next to that administrator access will not even see the multi-add option on the timesheet. All right, so I'm just going to jump back into the PowerPoint. We talked about this already, but I did just want to highlight this a little bit more. So the selected categories at the top of the page, all the pages are listed independently off to the left. And if it's a tab or a button on those individual pages, they're listed further down in like a piece of paper looking item. And then here it also tells you this is the category, this is the page. In this case, this is a tab rather than a button. Okay. All right, so moseying on to our next page in the access category is going to be the groups page. Now, I do want to remind you, we are still working in this administrator access here off to the left-hand side. So if I needed to make adjustments to other access groups, you need to make sure that you're clicking on them so that you're updating the correct one. Not all access types will have all of the options up here. This will come more into the advanced page, so you just have to make sure as you're clicking to other pages, you're still where you want to be. Okay. So when you're filtering groups down per access group, you'll want to click on the group item here in the main part. So here I'm working on the pay group. And then as you start restricting access to different items, you'll want to move the items to the right-hand side that access group should be able to use. So in this case, my administrators can use the USA employee pay group and the Canadian employee pay groups on the timesheet. They'll still be able to see records corresponding to any of these other pay groups if there's an employee that's punching into that item, but the user themselves assigned to this administrator access will not be able to touch records or add records to this group. And that's also going to come into play from the employee info page if you're manually selecting group items, or any other parts of the system where you would have to add that, like the scheduler. So if I jump to location, so if everything's on the left, that means nothing is filtered. They'll always be able to see everything. As soon as I start filtering it, it's going to limit just to what's in the selected. So this also means that if I add in a new location that the administrator access should be able to use, I'll need to come back to this page and add it as a selected item because it will not move to selected automatically. I will say most organizations don't actually filter based off of this group item. You can also do this by individual user as well, or individual employee if you did not need it to apply to the entire access group. Now the next one here is the templates page. And I'm actually going to jump to an employee option for this one. But before I do so, when you set up templates here for an administrator or supervisor access group, this is mostly going to come into play when you're using the template schedules or when you're requesting time off on behalf of an employee if you're using the template style time off requests. When I jump to an employee access group, this is going to then apply to when employees make time off on the time clock. And then also will apply if the employee is using the template style time off requests. So the two different types here, just as a refresher, there's the non-template, which is where the employee actually picks the pay code and then puts in the number of hours. And then the template style is where you actually dictate for them. So here the employee only has the option of using floating holiday for 8 hours. So they would actually select that one option of floating holiday for 8 hours, rather than selecting the pay code floating holidays and entering 8 hours. So also when you're setting up the different scheduling templates for the administrator or supervisor access group, this will also push out again to that templates page. So if I create 25 different scheduling templates here, that means every person who's assigned to the administrator access group is going to see all 25 of those scheduling templates on the template schedules page. And they won't be able to remove them or adjust them. So you're basically forcing them to see those templates. Okay. I'm going to skip over the advanced page because there's quite a few different options in there. So we're going to jump to the dashboard page instead. So the dashboard page here allows you to restrict which gadgets this access group will see on their dashboard. And you can also change the order of them as they appear. So let's say I wanted proactive alerts to be the top left-hand side. Push that all the way up. Or maybe this access group does not need to see any information about the time clocks. I can remove that altogether. Save that. Now this is a page that does not auto-refresh, so we do need to save it. So once I've selected the different gadgets, then I can come down here and do a little bit more customization. Do we want this access group to be able to make their own dashboard configuration, meaning can they move the gadgets around on there to put them in whatever order makes the most sense for them? Do we want to allow this user group to be able to add in a custom background image to their dashboard? If you are using the Leave Shared calendar where you can see when other people have approved time off, should this access group only see people that are assigned to them individually, or all employees in the organization, or do you want to select which group? So everyone in this administrator access group can see all of the USA employees on this calendar, rather than only those that are directly assigned to them. You can also then configure the template for them. So you can come in here, open and close different items. You can rename some of the gadgets. You can tell them to auto collapse or not. And then once you've made all of those changes, there is a republish template, and that's going to take all of the changes you just made and push it out to that access group so that everybody's dashboard looks exactly the same as what you selected here. So if anyone's already been in the system and customized it, it's going to push this out and restructure it to be exactly the same. And then there is the option for the external gadget. We do have a webinar specifically focused on the dashboard and how to set that up per access group and user and for your individual usage, if you wanted more information on the dashboard itself. The next page we're going to jump to then is the mobile. So this is where you can set up what this access group can do with the individual mobile access. So again, most commonly with employees, so I'm just going to jump to one. Probably pick one that says with mobile so we can see that it's enabled. Okay. So we want to check the box first to allow the mobile access. So this means that when employees download the app, if they have all the configuration items in place, it will actually recognize them. We do need to select which mobile template they'll use. So you may have multiple options in here. You may have one that has employee punch. So those employees could punch from the mobile app. You may have one where it's an employee no punch, meaning they can download the app and they can use most of the functions, but they don't have the ability to punch from it. And then down below here, you get to pick and choose what items show up on the timesheet when they review the timesheet from the mobile app itself. And again, you can add and remove items as necessary, move them around. And then if your employees are punching from the app, you get to choose if you want to enable that GPS. So if we just enable the GPS, that means it's going to pick up their location when they punch in, as long as their app is set to grab that location. In this case, it's not going to track them. They hit punch, it grabs their GPS location, puts it in the audit trail of the timesheet, and they're done. Now, I don't have this location data as required, meaning if my employee has told the app that it is not allowed to grab location, this is still going to allow them to punch because I'm not requiring it. Once I check this box, that means if the employee does not allow the app to grab their location, they cannot punch in or out, and they can't transfer. So they have to go in and make sure the app can grab their location. And then we also have that option to turn on the GPS lockouts. So we can program different addresses into the system where employees are allowed to punch from. And then as long as the employee is at one of those locations, they'll be able to punch in or out. All right, and then once you're done modifying the page here, click Save to make sure that it saves in the system. And then the next time an employee logs into the app successfully, they would see all these updates. So with these other employee access groups I have where the mobile access isn't even turned on, the employee would be able to download the app because at that point it's not validating where they're going in the app. But if they tried to connect it to their employee ID or to their specific database, it actually wouldn't allow them to review any information because they do not have access to the app. Okay. All right, now we get into the very nitty-gritty of the access group. So before I jump into that, I'm just going to head back to the list page and then just give a refresher very quickly on what we've gone through so far. The list page is where you create additional access groups. The page menu is where you turn on the categories and pages. Page access is where you get to go into each of the different categories and pages, mark if it's not allowed, so people in that access group cannot even see the option. Mark it as read-only, so people in that access group could see the information but not make any changes. Or full access, so that people in that access group could make all the changes they have other permissions for. My example is the timesheet. Employee has access to timesheet edits, it looks like from here, but then it's also going to determine which pay codes I give them access to. Then as you scroll down the page, there might be some additional options. These little, lack of a better word, papers here will indicate whether it's a tab or a button on the individual page. So again, my example, we're in the attendance category on the timesheet page, and in this case, this is the multi-add button. And based off the current configuration, this employee access group is not allowed to even see the button. Then the next page is groups. Let me jump back to my administrator access. So this administrator access says anyone who's assigned to this only has permissions to use the USA employee and Canadian employees pay group on the timesheet, from the employee info page, and from the scheduling pages. They can see the other information, they just can't make any adjustments to them or any of the data that's attached to them. The templates page allows you to create scheduling templates for that access group. Or if you're on an employee access group, this will determine which templates the employees can see from the time clock, if they're requesting time off from there. Or if you're using the template style time off request, this is going to dictate which types of time off the employee can request with. The dashboard page lets you configure the different gadgets and settings for each of the access groups and their permissions to those items. And then the mobile page allows you to activate or deactivate access to the mobile app. You get to determine which function key template, which is going to determine if employees can punch or not punch from the mobile app. Set up the timesheet columns, and then if the employee is punching, if they should grab the GPS location when they punch. All right, so now we're going to jump into advanced. If you've ever called into support and they've needed to walk you through this section, they're probably usually going to send you to the access category advanced page, some kind of tab, and some kind of section in here. So as you can see, we have a lot of items at the top of the page here. Okay. So what we're going to do is just go into the most commonly used areas, and I'll do a little bit of explanation in here. Okay, so the most common areas in here, let's get to that slide. Covered all of this already. Mobile app. Here we go. Is changing timesheet approval levels. So when somebody hits that submit or approve button on the timesheet, which level of approval should it go to? Setting timesheet preferences. So activating summary options or activating if the notes should grab the username and time the note was created. Setting up the timesheet columns, giving access to pay codes on if they have full access to the timesheet to use them, giving access to reason codes. If it's an employee access group which login pages, if they're using the direct link into NovaTime, which ones can they use? Does that access group have permissions to use the accrual management page to manually add and remove hours from different accruals? The ability to reset passwords either for employees or for themselves as an employee. Some general information about the CarePoint screening. If you have that thermal reader on your time clock to read temperatures as employees are punching in. And then access to timesheet exceptions and their colors. So if you look at your timesheets today, for example, if an employee goes into overtime, some databases will show that overtime purple. Some databases have that set to green. Some have it set to yellow. So where is that configured and how can you change those colors? Okay, so we're going to start here on the timesheet page where we launched into. And the first thing is the timesheet approval. So here again, we are still in my administrator access group. So when an administrator selects that approve button on the timesheet, it's going to send those timesheets into payroll status. As you can see, as I drop down here, I can select whichever status I want. If you do have more than 4 approval levels, you will see all of the options that your organization uses. If I want this access group to be able to unapprove timesheets, if it's not past their level of approval, then I have this checkbox enabled. Am I override or progressive? So override means that if I were to jump into a timesheet right now, I could hit approve and it's going to send to payroll. It doesn't need to go from open to submit, submit to approved, and then approve to payroll. I can go in there and approve it if I need to. Progressive would mean that each step before me has to be done before I can actually come in here and approve it. And then let's say people cannot approve the timesheets if there's a missing punch on there. So that means you can't approve it from the timesheet page itself or the summary page. So those are the big areas when it comes to timesheet approval. Timesheet preference, there's a bunch of checkboxes in here, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but it is useful as you're trying to set up different access for the timesheet. If you do come in to look at the preferences to see what's going to work the best. So there is an option in here that says display, here it is, display date, time, and user stamp for records, for note records. So when someone adds a note to a timesheet, the system is going to automatically put who put that note and when they put the note in there. That's probably my favorite tab in here. And then the last one in this timesheet page is the timesheet columns. So again, anything on the right-hand side is what's selected for this access group to see. You can add and remove everything except the asterisk ones. And then you can move the columns up and down using the red arrows here off to the right. If you save the page, you can then publish it. So that way everyone in this access group has the exact same view of the timesheet when it comes to the columns. And then if you allow them to manipulate the columns themselves, those users could still come in here and modify that timesheet themselves when it comes to the column setup. And then as you see, there are some other options in here. If you have access to this page, you can come around too, but those are the 3 most commonly used ones. Okay. Now the next tab in here is the pay code tab. So this is giving permissions to using different pay codes on the timesheet. So again, I'm in my administrator access group off to the left-hand side. So that means this administrator access group can see and use any pay code in the system as of right now. If I wanted to restrict one, let's say this admin group cannot use unpaid on the timesheet, I just move it over to the left-hand side and save. So I'll still be able to see records on unpaid, but I won't be able to, remove them or update them or do anything with them other than view them. Now, if I jump to an employee access group, if you're using the non-template style for time off requests, where the employee actually selects a pay code rather than a template, down at the bottom of their pay code page is where you get to select what the employee's option is when it comes to time off. So when an employee from this access group goes to make a time off request, they're only going to see the pay code of vacation and the pay code of sick. And then if I scroll up a little bit, you'll be able to see also if you have the expense module turned on, you can pick and choose which expense pay codes the employee can use. And then if the employee has access to their timesheet, you can pick and choose which pay codes the employee can add records to or make modifications for. In this case, because I have nothing over here to the right, this employee access group does not have access to make any adjustments to their timesheet or any of these pay codes. All right, the next one here is a relatively new tab if you've been in the system for quite a while, reason codes. If you are an organization that is reason code heavy, so reason codes can be used for multiple items. Some organizations use reason codes to indicate when employees earn points, or if you're just indicating some static reasons to why something happened on the timesheet, rather than adding a note and having different terminology every time a user adds a note. Like in this case, no call, no show. If my employee is taking an unpaid day, but it's a no call, no show, I could add it to the timesheet so that way I could run reports to see how often that's happening. Again, everything that's listed on the left will be available. So everything's on the left, everything's available for this access group to use. As soon as I start narrowing it down, then all of a sudden this access group can only use the no call, no show reason code on the timesheet. If you are using the FMLA module, this does not restrict the reason codes through the FMLA module. That would be configured from the FMLA rule itself. All right, the next one is going to be the Miscellaneous tab. I'll jump way over here. Yep. All right, just a couple of things on the Miscellaneous tab here. The accruals section here at the top has a checkbox here to allow access the accrual management page. So usually administrator access will always have this. So that way you can go and add and remove accrual information. You can also limit which accrual codes can be seen on that accrual history page. But as soon as you start limiting this, if you ever add in additional accrual codes, you would have to remember to come in here and move them to selected. So if my administrator should only be able to see the history and the balance for PTO from the accrual history, I would move PTO over here. If I ever add in a floating holiday accrual, I would have to remember to come back to this page, select the floating holiday from available, and move it over to the selected items so that the administrator access could then see the history and balance for PTO, as well as the balance and history for the floating holiday. But just like all the other pages, if you keep everything to the left, then everything's available, even new items, as they're added into the system. The second most common item on this page is the system login. And that's going to be the ability to reset passwords if the page is set to read only. So if a supervisor is able to see the employee info page, see how the employee is set up in the time system, you can still set that page to read only so they can see the information but not make changes. But with this checkbox, then it will activate the ability to reset the password for the time system. So if you are using the NovaTime Direct login pages, then this would reset that password the employee uses. If you're logging in through employee self-service, this would not change that password. This is only for NovaTime. And then lastly, if you are using that care point where it does the thermal reader on the time clocks, this is where the setup is for those independent access groups. All right, so the next one here is the exceptions tab. I know we're kind of jumping all over the place. So there are two main components to this. The first one is at the top of the page, of course, you get to pick and choose which exceptions this access group can see or use. And then once you've selected the items and saved the page, then you can come down to the bottom and start color coding them. So missing punches, when the administrator access group sees them on the timesheet, will show in this red color. Tardies are going to be pink. My overtime is going to be green. And then I can click into each of those and make adjustments to them as I need to. Now, if you're an administrator and you're creating additional access groups, you can always use that copy function. But in case you don't, if you do need to copy this color from one access group to the next, I usually open up a Word document and say overtime, and then I'll copy this number letter combination down here. So that way, when you go into the next access group, if you want that exact same green, you just copy that information in here and it's going to populate that exact same color the other access group has. You don't have to have colors on your exceptions. I do like to suggest using more of the pastels, because then you can still read the information that's showing underneath. And then again, save the page. And then that will populate for you when you log into the system next. Okay. There are some other tabs on here. Oh, the only one I haven't gone through yet is from the employee side. So let me jump to an employee access group. So this is only going to apply if you're using the direct link into NovaTime. So you're not flipping over from another software using a single sign-on feature. And I guess that'd be the only, or you're not logging in through employee self-service. There is an option for employee access groups only called EWS login. And this allows you to restrict which link the employee can use to get into the system. So if I were to select EWS kiosk, that means the link that says EWS kiosk in it is the only one this employee's access group can use. The reason an organization might use this section is you might have a salaried employee access group where they only have access to the kiosk, so they can't accidentally punch. You might have an employee access group who only has the punch option, no transfer, no employee web service, just punch. And the explanation down here will give you a little bit more information. And that way you can at least limit which links the employee can use if your organization uses multiple. All right, that's it for the access group, I should say. As you can see, there are a lot of additional options, tabs, pages that we haven't navigated to. There's still used items, just not as commonly when it comes to support or configuring a database. If you do have any questions after the webinar today, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team. They can always give you additional information as well.